Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to our first 3 virtual field sessions. My name is Doug Fountain. I'm with Halton Planning and Design based in Ottawa, your host city for this year's Congress. We are proud to be a sponsor of this component of the 2021 CSLA OALA Congress, and I'm personally very pleased to have been a small part of a much larger committee of volunteers responsible for pulling these sessions together. More importantly, we would not be in this position without the efforts of our presenters. The Virtual Field Sessions Committee was aware, and we were frequently reminded of how popular tours have been at past in-person congresses and how much useful information delegates are able to take home with them to their respective communities and practices. Through the call for submissions, we were very hopeful that the essence of a site visit could be captured. And I have to say that all the session presenters that you're about to see really stepped up and delivered. We're confident that you'll be impressed with the range of topics, the subject matter, and the production quality. So thank you very much to all the virtual field session presenters. Before I introduce them all, I'll just go over the format and a few tips to help us interact with the presenters. Each virtual field session video runs between 10 and 15 minutes. Each one will be played, and while they're running, you are encouraged to enter your questions or comments into the Q&A box shown on the screen, not the chat box. These questions will be visible to all delegates, but will remain anonymous. If you see a question similar to what you were about to ask, you can simply upvote it, and I will ask the most common questions to the presenter at the end of the video. You don't have to wait until the end of the presentation. Feel free as a thought arises to enter it into that Q&A box. We'll only have about 5 to 6 minutes of Q&A after each session, so we can't promise that we'll get to all the questions. But if you would like to connect with any of the presenters, please do so through the EventMobi platform under the Participants tab that was mentioned previously. All the full presenter biographies are also included through this platform. So I will do a amended introduction to each of those. So let's begin. So with Ottawa being our host city, we felt it most appropriate that our first presenter be a local landscape architect. Susan Fisher is with the National Capital Commission, and she'll be presenting an ambitious and exciting plan for restoring habitat, flood resiliency, and the public's connection to the Ottawa River through a 9-kilometer riverfront park stretching just west of Ottawa's urban core. Our second session will be hosted by Chris Hardwicke and Grace Yang from O2 Planning and Design out of Calgary. They're going to showcase for us another local project underway at Ottawa's Science and Technology Museum. That will prove to be a unique, engaging, and educating space for the local community as well as visitors. Our final presenter is Kent Rundle from Conservation Halton. Kent will take us on a tour of a 100-acre mixed-use community park in Hamilton and show us how his organization and community have been working to restore habitat and revitalize degraded natural features over the past 2 decades. So I hope you enjoy these videos, and we will connect in about 13 minutes. Thank you.
The Ottawa River is the natural and cultural heart of Canada's capital region. Ancestors of the Algonquin Anishinaabe people have lived on the shoreline for thousands of years, while the river provided a major travel route. Followed 400 years ago by Europeans including Samuel de Champlain, fur traders and settlers, but the region remains unceded territory today. Fossils that are visible today connect us to pre-human times. The powerful rapids, dramatic ice forms, migratory birds, and sunsets remind us of natural cycles we depend on and need to experience for our well-being.
I'm Susan Fisher, a senior landscape architect with the National Capital Commission. This video focuses on a 9-kilometer riverfront park just upstream of Ottawa's urban core, surrounded on one side by urban neighborhoods and on the other side by the river. It's on 220 hectares of land owned and managed by the NCC. Many of the park's features were built in the 1960s, but in 2018, the NCC, responding to the need for revitalization, created a long-range plan for the park. entitled the Ottawa River South Shore Riverfront Park Plan. Now let's explore some of the designed and built projects that demonstrate the plan's objectives.
We'll start with connecting people safely to the river. The Capital Pathway, stretching the full length of the park along its shoreline, is heavily used by pedestrians, cyclists, and skiers, and connects the destinations they enjoy along with kayakers, swimmers, and birdwatchers. However, a 4-lane scenic parkway along the full length of the park with only 9 crossing points limits the ability of non-motorists to safely access the shoreline. New crossings will be added throughout the park, including 2 new underpasses and 3 signalized at-grade crossings in the next year around a stretch of the park currently under construction for the City of Ottawa's LRT Confederation Line West extension. The LRT will traverse a roughly 1.3 kilometer length of the park, mostly underground. This proposed at-grade crossing at Rochester Field is an example of a safer way to cross the parkway. The parkway will also be reconfigured in this area to reduce speeds, including narrowing the median, adding curves, and reducing the speed limit to 50 kilometers per hour. Heavy use of the multi-use pathway has resulted in conflicts between users. As a result, the pathway will be reconfigured, separating pedestrians and cyclists. Where they need to cross paths, pedestrians will be given priority. Pathway users will also enjoy new amenities such as washrooms, activity nodes, and resting areas to enjoy the views. The park is covered in snow about a third of the year, but winter is a great time to enjoy it, observing the ice and vivid sunsets. The public now has access to 16 kilometers of groomed trails in the park for skiers, winter bikers, and walkers. The trail starts in the core area and is accessible along the LRT, so you can enjoy the river and the outdoors without a car. Next, I'll describe flood resilience and stormwater improvements. In 2017 and 2019, the Ottawa River experienced 1 to 100 year flood events, damaging pathways and infrastructure, and eroding shoreline sections in the park. The long-term plan is to move all parking away from the river and out of the 100-year floodplain, and all pathways out of the 20-year floodplain. At the Champlain node, just downstream of the Champlain Bridge, the floods inundated much of the node and caused the collapse of an aging storm sewer, resulting in a sinkhole in an existing 65-car parking lot. In 2019, the NCC removed the parking lot, which was directly adjacent to the river, and built a new one further away from the river and above the 100-year floodplain. The resulting new green space will enhance the node's flood resilience, habitat, and user experience, since shoreline and pathway users will no longer be squeezed up against a parking lot. All stormwater from the parking lot is now treated in a 90-meter-long bioswale, targeting 80% total suspended solids removal prior to release into the river. This will also be the goal of a series of bioswales that will be added along the reconfigured parkway stretch mentioned earlier. The other parking lots in the park will also be converted to green space, including this one at Westboro Beach. The NCC will remove this 65-stall parking lot beside the shoreline and replace it on the other side of the parkway. Since the original parking lot dominates the node, converting it to green space will allow for more public enjoyment and habitat near the shoreline. All stormwater in the new parking lot will be treated in a bioswale, and the new lot will include permeable surfaces. The shoreline is subjected to strong water flows and ice, making it susceptible to erosion. In 2017, scouring of base materials and wave action, combined with receding floodwaters, caused significant erosion and displacement along the edges of some pathway sections. For example, in a bay near the Carlton Avenue underpass, the floodwaters topped the pathway, eroding the shoreline and undermining its base and surface. In 2018, the NCC regraded the damaged slope and placed very large riprap, both in size and layer thickness, bounded up at the top edge of the riprap to trap soil and wood debris, reducing erosion as the floodwaters recede. Existing vegetation, including red osier dogwood, was cut to 30 centimeters above grade, adding riprap around the cut stems. The vegetation re-emerged and has thrived so far. 2018 repairs held up well against 2019 flooding. No major erosion occurred at these locations, and those techniques were used to repair new flood-damaged sections after 2019, which continue to perform well. Riprap and existing vegetation are the preferred solutions compared to retaining walls because riprap shifts with the ice and water movement, settling in over time, making it more self-adjusting. Vegetation is self-repairing and has other environmental benefits, so established non-invasive vegetation will be protected on these repaired shoreline sections. However, attempts to establish new vegetation in heavily eroded slopes elsewhere on the river have been challenging due to the heavy flows and ice, so the NCC continues to try new techniques. Heavily planting the top of the repaired slopes is an important design feature that has worked well. Now let's look at some habitat enhancements. In the next few years, the 2.5 kilometer stretch of the park from Woodruff Avenue to Westboro Beach will be planted with a diverse range of non-invasive species, roughly 8,000 meters squared of pollinator meadows, and 2,800 new trees, which far exceeds the minimum 2-to-1 compensation ratio for trees that were removed for the City of Ottawa's LRT in that area. A monitoring and maintenance program several years after installation will be key to the long-term success. The NCC has reduced the frequency of mowing to once per year in most of the park and will phase in more meadows over time. A key objective is to protect and enhance sensitive habitat, including breeding and overwintering sites, wetlands, and aquatic and riparian habitat. For example, in 2015, complex habitat was created by transforming a 1,500 meters squared area of invasive species into a wetland at Remick Rapids in partnership with the Rideau Valley Conservation Authority. The construction created diverse depths and substrate materials, including sand and fine gravel for nesting turtles. Some excavated materials from the site were reused for habitat, including root wads and basking logs from dead ash trees and snake shelters from excavated boulders. Native shrubs and trees were planted around the perimeter, and a wetland and shoreline seed mix was applied in the wetland and riparian areas. A 5-year monitoring program confirms the successful establishment of native flora and fauna in the wetland. Invasive species, including common buckthorn, dominate much of the shoreline. The Capital Region suffered catastrophic loss of its ash trees due to the emerald ash borer starting roughly 12 years ago, causing significant tree canopy loss in the park. Invasive species colonized large areas where dead trees were too numerous to remove, but the plan is to remove them on the shoreline side of the parkway. The central green area in this clip at Remick Rapids shows an example of the problem. The area at the far end is the wetland I just described, where dead ash and invasive species were removed in 2015 before filming this clip. The larger area in the center shows the condition before construction of a second phase of the habitat restoration, so you can see the dead ash and invasive species before they were removed. This clip shows the results of the second phase. It's an 8,600 meter squared area where in 2018, dead ash and buckthorn were removed by excavating the roots, except immediately around existing trees to be protected. Invasive species in those areas were suppressed by cutting them just above the ground and wrapping the stumps in black plastic for at least 2 years. The disturbed areas were seeded with pollinator meadow mixes and planted with diverse shrubs and tree species and sizes, re-establishing the woodland over time. Interpretation panels explain the project to the public. Views to the river will also be improved by removing invasive species that block views. The NCC will replace them with non-invasive species that provide a low understory and tall canopy of mostly deciduous trees to keep eye-level views open. To protect the night sky, the park will remain dark, except at some activity nodes where downlighting will provide minimal lighting to accommodate nighttime uses. Now we'll talk about activity nodes for waterfront enjoyment. The plan proposes improvements at 9 activity nodes, offering visitors year-round destinations to explore and enjoy the waterfront, offering access to the water for kayaking, canoeing, swimming, dipping a toe in the water, or sitting and enjoying the views. The nodes are connected by the Capital Pathway and the Winter Trail, offering those users comfort such as washrooms and food services. An example is Westboro Beach, which is already a popular attraction, featuring a public beach and a pavilion for lifeguard space, washrooms, and a cafe, which are open in the beach season. Built in 1967, the pavilion is a designated federal heritage structure, although its condition today needs improvement. The NCC will rehabilitate and refresh the pavilions, responding to significant consultation from the public and stakeholders. It also plans a new zero-carbon, 375 square meter building for 4-season use, featuring a restaurant, public washrooms, and community space. The nodes are placemaking opportunities celebrating the park's natural and cultural history. For example, Westboro Beach features the stone ruins of Skeed's Mill, a sawmill that was destroyed by fire in 1888, but was an important site in the history of the capital region. While today it is hidden by weeds and lacks signage, the design will reveal and protect the ruins and educate the public through interpretation panels and other features that celebrate the site's history, such as an adjacent play feature. The pandemic has reinforced how crucial public open space is to our health and well-being. With indoor recreation closed or limited, the public has flocked to the Riverfront Park, not only for exercise, but also to socialize safely. The park also enables visitors to connect to natural cycles, breathe fresh air, and enjoy majestic views, so crucial to our emotional well-being in these challenging times. It will play an increasingly important role in our resilience to climate change and other challenges in the years ahead. On behalf of the National Capital Commission, thank you for listening.
That was great, Susan. Just before we get into questions, I was just curious, is a copy of the plan available anywhere online that people could check out?
Yes, on the NCC's website, we have the Ottawa River South Shore Riverfront Park Plan. That's the long-range plan that I described. So you can download a copy off of the NCC's website. And we also have a presentation about the Westboro Beach schematic design that we used for a public consultation earlier in the winter. And so that's also available online.
Okay, great. We have a question here about the total suspended solids. You mentioned the 80% target, removing total suspended solids. How is that calculated in the design?
So the engineers kind of factor in things like runoff. So how much runoff are we getting from the parking lot? What types of sediments are likely to be in that runoff? And then what's the volume of the bioretention medium that we have, which is ultimately the thing that really kind of filters that out. We also have CV shields in the catch basins. So the overflows in the bioswale have CV shields. It's a little device that basically has to kind of be cleaned out once a year. And that also traps a lot of the sediment as well. But it's largely the plant material, the roots, and the processes that the plant materials use that filter out those sediments.
Okay. Was there opposition to the removal or the decrease of the parking? If so, how was that addressed?
Yeah, there's a kind of a variety of opinions on that. So when we do a lot of public consultations, so the long range plan had a sort of 4 stages of public consultation. And at each stage, this notion of moving the parking lots was always kind of part of what we presented. And people generally have different opinions depending on whether you think there should be more or less parking. But generally, it's been very favorable. The idea for sure of moving the parking away from the riverfront is very, generally the public really likes that, because then that really makes the space much more usable for not only habitat, but for our recreational uses, for people's enjoyment of the riverfront. So it's generally been very favorable move.
Okay. Another question and a compliment. Beautiful waterfront location. Thanks for the great overview. Did local First Nations express an interest in being involved in the design?
Yeah, so there are certain priority projects that the community, so the Algonquin and Anishinaabe communities generally get involved in very specific projects that they choose as their priority projects because there are limited resources. They themselves have limited resources to get involved in projects. And so there were other projects that were kind of a higher priority for them. So they were less involved in, say, the Westboro Beach project or the Riverfront Park projects that I talked about. But there was a special consultation with the Anishinaabe Algonquin communities for the Riverfront Park plan. So that long-range plan that I described, there were special consultations with the Algonquin Anishinaabe communities.
Okay. You had mentioned a total of 9 activity nodes, and described plans for a few of them. What is the NCC planning at some of the other nodes along the park?
So if you'd like some more detailed information about that, the Riverfront Park plan has demonstration plans that show you the actual plans of kind of generally what we're proposing at those other nodes. But things like at the Deschênes Rapids, we're proposing a roughly 1 kilometer long boardwalk that goes into the water that will be a great place to see the migratory birds. We're proposing a number of paddler launches, so places where kayakers and canoers can launch their boats. So one in Mud Lake, one at Deschênes Rapids, at various places along the different activity nodes. So also proposing some pavilions potentially at the Parkdale node, say where we currently have from the 1960s plan, there's a kind of a vehicular roundabout there that takes up a lot of space. The plan there is to remove that roundabout and put in something that's more for public enjoyment. So including like a pavilion with a restaurant or washrooms, Bait Island, there's a pavilion proposed for that. So generally placing more kind of food services, washrooms, amenities for public enjoyment all the way along those nodes.
Okay. I think we have time for one more question, a quick one. It was about lighting. Was there resistance to the low lighting scheme considering overwhelming affection for septed principles?
Yeah, well, currently there is virtually no lighting other than maybe one of the parking lots. We generally don't have any lighting anywhere in the park. And so it's generally intended to be more of a daytime use. And so I think we didn't really get any opposition from a septed point of view. I think because people understand that generally users of that park are daytime users because it's more of a nature environment. But at some of the nodes, like where we're actually inviting people to come at night, like Westboro Beach, it is a nighttime destination. There's a cafe and there'll be a restaurant and then sometimes bands play there. So for sure, more lighting would be required at a node like that, where we're actually inviting people to come at night. And I think people were really happy with the balance of kind of protecting the night sky and the natural habitat limitations in terms of lighting.
Sure. Okay. Well, thanks, Susan, very much for this. It's excellent. Please, delegates, reach out to Susan if you have more questions. I know I certainly do, and I'll be contacting her. I wish we had more time, but we do have to move on to our next presenters. So thank you, Susan. And Ryan, if you could start the video for Chris Hardwicke and Grace Yang.
Hello, and welcome to the virtual field session for the Canadian Science and Technology Museum Park Master Plan, Sustaining Communities Through STEAM. This project was led by O2 Planning and Design with Marianne Moser and Jay Ingram of Beakerhead. Vilain Paysage, and Earthscape. My name is Chris Hardwicke. I'm a principal at O2. And with me presenting today is Grace Yang, a landscape architect at O2. We're a planning and design firm that integrates landscape architecture, ecology, urban design, and planning in a holistic practice to create highly valued places. You might be familiar with STEM. The acronym stands for Science, Technology, Engineering, and Math. It's a learning approach that combines these subjects rather than treating them separately. Integrating the arts, such as music, visual arts, language arts, and design, expands STEM into STEAM. This virtual field session will walk you through how we've explored ideas of STEAM in public spaces and the process of developing a park master plan dedicated to STEAM. When thinking about public places that tell a story, we often think of heritage sites, interpretive elements, natural areas, or public artwork. We don't often come across public places that showcase science and technology, even though we're so shaped by it. First, we will talk about Beakerhead, a science festival in Calgary that O2 helped plan in 2017. Second, we'll show the design concept for the CSTM Park and how we applied STEAM learning concepts. The benefits of STEAM are intuitive to us in landscape architecture, as it's a prime example of a field that merges science and engineering with creative disciplines. It is the intersection between technical and creative streams that sparks creativity and inspiration. Beakerhead is a mashup of arts, science, and engineering. It draws thousands of people each year to a festival in Calgary. It's become a platform for new partnerships to merge. Artists, engineers, and scientists get to collaborate on a range of spectacles, live demonstrations, and pop-up installations around the city to immerse people in the world of science and technology. For several years, Stephen Avenue, one of Calgary's main streets, has been taken over by street-based experiences like a cornstarch walk and various artistic inventions and contraptions. In 2017, O2 helped Beakerhead plan the event that transformed the city into a game based on stakes and ladders, spanning parks, walkways, and buildings. The theme was dedicated to telling the story of Canada's 150 years of ingenuity while passing by large-scale contraptions, stair climbs, slides, and passages. An analysis of land use, walkability views, and existing landmarks helped us to pick the optimal sites for the temporary installation. These sites include the day-to-day overlooked spaces on the street level, bridges, alleyways, and rooftops, and underpasses. The range of installations were diverse. Works projected on heritage landmarks and attractions transformed the day-to-day infrastructure into creative corridors and new vistas in the city. Some key ideas and questions emerged through Beakerhead: accessibility and inclusion. Inclusion in terms of who gets to participate in the event. Festivals are free to the public and provide a gateway into learning about science and technology. Inclusion in terms of who gets to organize and shape space. At Beakerhead, installations were not limited to artists and professionals. Anyone could submit their idea and be involved. STEAM within cultural landscape. These STEAM-focused works have become part of the cultural landscape since 2013. Beakerhead partners with technology firms who provide sponsorships for some of the feature installations. Delight is enough. Marianne Moser and Jay Ingram, the founders of Beakerhead, emphasize that delight is enough, that if the experience resonates with people, they will remember it and be inspired to learn more about science and technology. O2 invited Beakerhead to join the CSTM project because of their experience bringing STEAM to the people. The Canadian Science and Technology Museum is operated by Ingenium, which also runs the Canada Agriculture and Food Museum and the Canadian Aviation and Space Museum in Ottawa. The role of CSTM is to showcase Canada's past and present innovations in science and technology. We took inspiration from Beakerhead to use STEAM as part of the engagement process. Engagement tools were animated with music, dancing, artwork, and interactive design sessions to engage a wide range of citizens, including kids, seniors, persons with disabilities, local neighbors, and the University of Ottawa. In our design approach, we focused on experiential learning, which advocates for learning through play. This is contrasted with didactic learning, where the learner receives information more passively. For example, by reading a sign, which is typical of conventional museum experiences. Now that I provided an introduction, I'm going to hand it over to Grace, who will lead us through a tour of CSTM.
The museum is located east of the Rundle River, about a 20-minute drive by car and 40-minute by transit from downtown. It's located on St. Laurent Boulevard, just south of Highway 417. It sits at the intersection of multiple communities, currently underserved by programmable open space, and lies within the industrial park area. Here are some images to give you a sense of the character of the area. Looking south down St. Laurent, you can see the lighthouse, that it provides a visual cue of the museum, but the museum itself is not visible from the street. The park master plan process started in 2016, and during this time, the museum underwent major renovations and began its construction for the new C3 building to the north here. And this would house the archival collections and new research spaces. So this campus renewal prompted CSTM to rethink a new vision for the park. The park space is bounded by major streets and surrounded by light industrial and retail outlets, and anchored by the collections building and the museum on the east end. Gladwin Crescent, this road runs through a third of the park. So here's an aerial of the museum and renovations in 2016. A year later, the museum reopens and construction starts for the C3 building. This is an image of the renewed museum with the interactive digital projection on the facade. So here you can see the C3 building nearing completion in its final phases and is completed today. So through consultation, the park was envisioned to be a national attraction and serve as a gateway to the museum. Its proximity to the neighborhoods also makes it important to serve as a local community park. The current open space is vast, relatively flat, with berms at the periphery. So you can see here it's underutilized, the main uses being picnicking and walking. It accommodates some artifacts like the famous lighthouse and steam engine locomotive. The current site layout has a conventional approach of displaying a collection of artifacts on an open lawn. And so the renewed vision instead tries to create a more engaging experience around the existing well-known artifacts. In thinking about the journey to the museum, we started at the arrival experience. So right now, most visitors get to the museum by car, and they bypass most of the park to go to the parking lot that's closest to the entrance. And so in order to encourage active ways to get to the park, we considered the Desire Line from the main intersection, bus stops, and this lighthouse landmark to the museum. And we provided new community connections and considered circulation for people coming by transit, walking, driving, cycling, and even skateboarding. Various activities are sequenced on the way, so regardless of where you arrive from the east or from the west, visitors are drawn from one point of interest to the next and encouraged to move across the whole park. So from the lighthouse, you can get a glimpse of the fitness and skateboarding area beyond. And from the fitness park and the skateboarding area, you can see the playground hill. And from the playground, you can see the museum entrance. So this is the proposed plan. A pathway hierarchy was established through path widths and distinctive paving and programming along the main path. The proposed lighting scheme extends usage into the night. Feature lighting illuminates key artifacts like the lighthouse and the locomotive. And light poles along the pathway provide an infrastructure for future digital projections and integration of power outlets for events. The park is organized with active uses concentrated along the main path, with passive uses dispersed across the park. So now we're going to zoom in closer to the site. Starting on the west end, a new accessible pathway slopes down towards a proposed gathering space at the base of the lighthouse. Mist jets and light beaming from the lighthouse create a mystical effect in the park. The amount of mowed areas are also reduced, replacing sod with meadow grasses. In winter months, the plaza transitions into a skating loop. Seasonal transitions are leveraged so that people can explore the changing states of water in this area. Moving east, the Flex Lawn offers a flexible area for temporary installations and larger scale events like Beakerhead. Just above that, the intent for this new parking space along the northern edge is to serve as an event space when needed. So this parking area has a plaza-like quality. Along the main path, parts of the path widen to form an outdoor classroom, skateboarding and fitness areas, and a sensory garden. The fitness area serves as an added amenity for the community. The sensory garden offers a low stimulation space within the park to consider those with different needs for learning. Musical equipment and talking tubes weave in and out of the terrain, and different surfaces and plants help stimulate visitors' senses through touch, sight, and scent. Other passive spaces include the outdoor classrooms and picnicking areas. These artful shelters double as solar panels to showcase renewable energy on site. Lastly, Everything Hill is where most activity happens. Peaks at varying heights are accessible by pathways and ramps, and play equipment at the base, as well as embedded in the slopes, offer a mix of interactive elements for various accessibility needs. At the top, visitors can watch the digital projection on the museum facade. The slopes are marked so people can measure their progress and distance from the ground. The inner slopes of the hills have an engineered and constructed look, while the outer slopes are planted so that it blends into the rest of the park. Our planting approach draws inspiration from two local plant communities, the mixed wood forest and meadow grassland, and hints to the nearby northern boreal landscape. So some final takeaways of this park plan was the importance to promote physical activity through programmed spaces while allowing some flexible open space for temporary uses. Also, the importance to leverage topography and seasonal transition so that the park is used year-round. Finally, to design the park as a gateway into the museum so that people can explore science outdoors. And this is especially important now, given the pandemic. We must consider how outdoor spaces can help institutions continue to build relationships with the community so that people can have a connection of learning and discovery even when museum doors are closed. Thank you.
Thanks, Grace and Chris. It was very, very good presentation. I was just curious. It's one of the benefits of moderating. I guess I get to ask my questions first. Can you tell us what was done differently during the public engagement stage of this project compared to a project of similar nature?
Sure. I mean, because it's a national institution, we had obliged to actually do a national consultation. So we did an online component that reached out across Canada for any ideas about what people would expect if they came to the nation's capital and to visit this museum. And that included reaching out to other partner institutions like Science North and Telespark and other scientific experts. So there's a variety of things we did at the nationwide scale. But then because of the location of this park in Ottawa, it really is an open space amenity for the local neighborhood. So we also made sure to engage the local neighborhood, and the museum itself wanted it to be used almost like a municipal park on a daily basis, without necessarily the people needing to come and enter the university, the museum itself. So we also engaged on site with a whole bunch of on site and with the local neighborhood, much the way you would do with a municipal thing. But we had like art jams and festivals on site so we could capture people that just happened to be walking by, because it's a relatively busy site in a suburban context. So we captured a lot of people that way that otherwise wouldn't. And then we had a series of targeted engagements for different user groups, such as persons with disabilities and some researchers at the University of Ottawa who were going to partner with the CSTM in order to monitor. These are experts in play and kinesiology and children education, so they were going to monitor the progress of this park as it was developed. So they wanted to set baseline expectations for how they could do kind of post construction monitoring of the play spaces and the way that the park is used.
Will the city have any role in managing it, or is it strictly being managed and maintained by the museum?
It would be maintained entirely by the museum, yeah.
Okay. A related question that came up, how does the maintenance work for garden areas such as the sensory garden? Will there be any volunteer involvement with that?
It's not yet determined. We made a maintenance plan with the museum, and part of their fundraising is they would have an endowment just for maintenance alone. So it would be perpetually funded over time, because it's a high level of appointment.
Okay. Some people are anxious to see when it's going to be built. Do you have a timing approximation?
No. We
Not
have
yet?
no timing. There's still fundraising, and COVID, of course, has put a wrench into that. So at the moment, it's undetermined.
Mm-hmm. I love that you didn't touch the lighthouse at all. In fact, you grounded it a little more sensibly than what it has been. It is quite a local icon. I remember it even personally visiting as a kid, that it stuck out. Someone has a question about any climate-related water concerns that could impact the mist feature proposed for around the lighthouse.
I don't think we really took that into consideration.
Okay. I think maybe they mean like local, freeze thaw and our, drastic climate change that we have here in Ottawa from plus 32 to minus 20.
Yeah, well, at the master plan level, no, we didn't really work that out. I mean, there's a number of technologies.
But I guess, the idea of the mist pad that it would be on during the summer, and it would become like a skating area, so that would be shut off in the winter time. Mm-hmm. But I love the idea of the lighthouse too, and we added the mist because it gives more context to the story, because it's just a lighthouse plopped out of its Halifax and here, and so the mist kind of tells a little bit of that story, but also in tandem with interactive light elements and its potential, kind of how it works together to create rainbows, and to kind of prompt more questions and spark kind of curiosity. That was kind of the intent of having the Mist Plaza there.
Okay. Beakerhead seems like a very interesting organization. How were they involved with the design and engagement for this project?
Yeah, so Beakerhead, we brought in the two founders and brought them to Ottawa for a series of workshops. And so it's Marianne Moser and Jay Ingram. And what they did was really bring their experience of making science into almost like a festival level experience in Calgary. And they really help the university, or I keep calling it the university for some, help the museum really think differently about what the experience of people coming to the site would be, and also to have flexible opportunities for science to change over time. A lot of the precedents that we looked at, they have these very specific installations that are supposed to teach you about physics or water flow and things like that, and they tend to become dated over time. So a lot of Beakerhead's influence was like, if you keep the flex lawn and the event space and you wire things in, you can program different experiences in the park over time and help animate it and always make it new and refreshing for people that come there, and not have to have as much built infrastructure that is fixed in a moment of interpretation.
Right. Is there a copy of the master plan online somewhere that people can consult and find out more about it?
I don't know. I don't actually know.
I don't believe it is
Yeah.
at the moment. Yeah.
Okay. And one last real quick question, because as landscape architects, we're all curious about this costing. Do you have a price tag on this, and were you able to assist the client with some sort of sensible phasing in of the project?
Yeah, it was cost out like at a high level, at Class D level, especially for fundraising, and so it's, yeah, they're working still on the fundraising for it. But
okay, great. Well, thank you very much. It's very interesting. I'm personally very excited for it to come to fruition. Hope to see it soon someday. Thanks again for your time. Again, participants, if you have more questions for Grace and Chris, you can connect with them through the conference platform. With that, we'll bring on Kent Rundle's video. If you could play that now, Ryan, that'd be great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Ken Rundle. I'm the coordinator of landowner outreach and restoration with Conservation Halton. We're here today at Courtcliffe Park, where I'm going to take you on a virtual tour of the restoration work we've completed.
Courtcliffe Park is located in the Bronte Creek watershed in Conservation Halton's jurisdiction. The park is just outside of Carlisle, which is a community in part of rural Hamilton. The park is mixed use. It has soccer fields, a playground, paved trails, and dirt trails. Conservation Halton's interest has been in Bronte Creek and Mountsburg Creek. And since 2014, along with our partners, we've been actively working to restore the creeks on the property. I'd now like to share a video that Conservation Halton put together in 2018 that tells the story of the restoration project and the history of the property. In 2002, Conservation Halton produced the Bronte Creek Watershed Study. The Bronte Creek Watershed Study identified Courtcliffe Park as a high priority for stream restoration as a result of over-widened creeks and barriers within the creek that were impacting negatively water quality and fish habitat.
So we decided to do this project because the creek in Courtcliffe Park was severely degraded. The previous owners had dug out the creek with heavy machinery, with excavators. We actually went up and looked at historical aerial photos of what the park looked like. And when you went back to 1930, you could see what it looked like as a forested landscape with a beautiful, narrow, meandering, healthy creek.
It evolved eventually in the 70s into a year-round sort of mobile home co-op. There was an annual bluegrass music festival held here at Courtcliffe Park. By 1998, all the mobile homes were moved out, and that began the conversion back to a park.
So when the city took it over, they determined that the vision for the park would be to make it a more natural space and bring it back to its natural heritage.
Brookies and Bronte Forever is an initiative Conservation Halton began in 2014. It's a program that focuses on improving habitat for brook trout in the Bronte Creek watershed in an effort to hopefully see populations start to rebound. Brook trout are kind of like a canary in a coal mine. Once we start to see their populations drop off, there's likely going to be other fish dropping off behind them and other aquatic organisms that we might start to lose.
They're the native trout. So native trout are part of our native biodiversity. They're also sentinels of the stream, and therefore that's why we want to focus on brook trout.
Okay, we're here at Courtcliffe Park. We've got our permits ready, equipment's on site. We're going to start the Mansburg Creek Restoration Project on Tuesday, February 21st. Stay tuned.
So phase 1 commenced in 2015. Phase 2 and phase 3 happened in 2016 and 2017. And because the alterations to the creek had essentially been done by machines, what we really needed to do was use machines to fix the creek.
This is just a good thing, and it's fun to build woody debris structures and habitat enhancement and know that it's enhancing the natural ecosystem, and it works.
So what we did to fix the creek in Courtcliffe Park were a few things. There was 3 locations where the park's walking path passed over top of the creek, and the culverts that were installed that allowed the water to flow underneath those walking paths were too small. So we had to replace those with bridges that would allow the creek waters to move freely underneath the walking paths. We created floodplain wetland features where there was before online ponds. Contractors came in, they installed natural channel design, which included installation of 9 new riffles. They also installed some pools and some overhead woody structure for fish and animals to live under and find refugia in, as well as some boulder clusters. And we did riparian plantings to restore the vegetation creekside. So within the park, we've planted over 1,000 native trees and shrubs, and we've planted these creekside to help reestablish the riparian area on Bronte and Mansburg Creek. And we've also planted wild wetland species within the floodplain wetland features. We reconnected Mansburg Creek to its original channel. We filled in those straightened channels and redirected all the flows back to the main channel of Bronte and Mansburg Creek. And this is really important because creeks actually build habitat features with the flow of the water. So once this channel had been naturally restored to a healthy state, we were then able to excavate out the earthen plug that had redirected Mansburg Creek into a straightened channel and restore flows back to the original channel of Mansburg Creek.
With regards to the Courtcliffe Park Restoration Project, I think to me the most exciting element of this is it's demonstrating that Conservation Halton and many conservation authorities around the province have this ability to put together multifaceted projects such as this that may span multiple years, have very different levels of restoration that are required, and then the ability to backstop all of that by putting together a coalition.
Because we do get our energy from the environment, we also want to make sure that we're restoring that environment back to its original form.
So I'm really pleased to see the fine work that people working together can do with a lot of perseverance, a lot of sweat equity, but can still do good work. I'm very pleased about that, and I'm very happy to have been partnered with this program.
I think that video does a nice job of telling the story of the restoration works that have been completed, but I imagine this group would like to take a closer look at a few elements of the project. So with that in mind, I'd like to highlight some of the infrastructure replacements, the community contributions and partnerships, and some of the outcomes that we've achieved to date.
So we're here at Bronte Creek at the bottom end of the park. This work here was phase 1 of the large-scale stream restoration work that was led by our partners, Canada. The first work was the replacement of an old culvert that was in this location with a spanning bridge.
This was one of 6 undersized stream crossings that we had to mitigate in the process of undertaking this restoration project. To maintain the existing trail networks, we installed 4 new spanning stream crossings. The bridges weren't the only human infrastructure we had to deal with.
This area here was used as a swimming pond. They had lined the bottom with concrete, and in the heydays of the trailer park here, they used to swim in the very cold water of Mountsburg Creek here. So as a part of the restoration, we had to remove that concrete before building the berm, and then we created micro-topography and added logs and other features to support wetland creatures.
Through the years, we've relied heavily on partnerships and volunteer and community contributions for this project to be successful. In all, we've had 328 volunteers contribute over 1,280 hours of their time towards the success of the project. In addition to volunteer contributions, we've also worked with over 25 different community groups and agencies along the way.
Well, thanks very much for joining me today here at Courtcliffe Park. I hope you enjoyed the tour and you have a better understanding of some of the work that Conservation Halton and our partners have been able to accomplish here. And hopefully one day you can visit the park for real. Take care.
Thanks, Kent. That was great. There's lots of good compliments coming in here on the great work you've done in Hamilton. You're an ecosystem restoration specialist. I was just curious if any landscape architects played a role in this project, or what you see their role being in projects similar to this.
So on this particular project, there were not any landscape architects involved in the work. Certainly there is a role for landscape architects in this type of work. We do have landscape architects on staff at Conservation Halton normally. There are vacancies right now. Generally they're working on our own park lands, not on some of our partners' lands. It would have been very valuable to have the input of a landscape architect, I think, on this project, because we were dealing with a lot of infrastructure related to the trails and competing, competing is not the right word, but competing with some of the other land uses and land uses in the property, and trying to figure out how to best marry them together.
Mm-hmm. Okay. What unexpected challenges did you face in the project? You mentioned the concrete liner in the pond, but I'm sure it wasn't limited to just that. Any anecdotes that you can share?
Yeah. So most of our work was done during winter construction. This was primarily just the nature of our funding cycles. So this was funded through corporate sponsorships, through federal and provincial grants. And I'm sure some folks here are very familiar with how those can delay your projects. So we were scrambling doing this work in the frigid cold February temperatures, and at one point we actually had a pretty substantial midwinter thaw, which made things treacherous. We had the entire site flooded out, equipment sinking in the mud, so it was definitely a challenge. The other major challenge is that we do have a union gas pipeline that runs right through the park. It's a challenge and an opportunity when you have major infrastructure like that running through a park like this. Those are big partners that can really lend a big hand. And I think you saw in the video there that Union Gas was a financial contributor, but they were also a very major in-kind contributor to the project. So providing machine time, dewatering our site for us, that sort of thing, because they had the equipment to do that sort of work.
There was a related question. Does Conservation Halton access new and existing ongoing partners with each project?
Yeah, we're constantly engaging new partners in our restoration projects or our landowner outreach projects. But, we do try to maintain good relationships with our existing partners and try to bring them along to the next project where it makes sense to do so.
Okay. I've got everybody's dying to know the name of your dog.
My dog's name is Esker. So he's named after a glacial fluvial landform, which not a lot of people know, but I'm sure a lot of people on this call would have known that.
Yes, we all would. We're all nodding.
Yeah.
With the pools and riffles, have you had any issues with the water going around the riffles instead of through them? And have you had to correct anything?
No, not on this site. That is certainly something that has happened on other sites. One of the so I mentioned that winter construction was a challenge, but in our case, it also was really helpful because we had that human-made straightened channel that was diverting Mountsburg Creek, and we were doing all of our work essentially offline in a historic channel. We did it all in the winter, and we did not connect the channel. We left it in the straight channel, and we waited for the cold water construction window to reopen in the summer, so July 1st, which was fantastic. It really allowed the entire site to stabilize. The native vegetation that we planted, the seed mix that we put down had established. So as soon as we opened that channel in August, it looked like it had been there for, a year. And it was very, very stable, and I mean, my second comment to that would be that we worked with an extremely experienced contractor, which, again, everybody on the call will appreciate the benefit of having just a top-notch contractor on a project.
Sure. They're often our most important partner in projects like this.
Yeah.
Have the brook trout returned? Is there any monitoring of that happening?
So yes, we are doing a lot of monitoring. No, brook trout have not returned yet. I hope they do. There's certainly a nearby resident population, so stocking won't be required. They should be able to repopulate, redistribute themselves on their own, which is exciting. There are, we're still actively working it in the park. There is still a lot of work to do in terms of improving the habitat and narrowing the creek, and we're taking a passive approach using volunteers to do that work. So I can't say for sure when they'll be back. Our monitoring data is pointing to improvements. So our benthic invertebrate community, the aquatic insect community, is improving. So that's a really good sign. We're starting to see some of the aquatic invertebrates that you would expect to find in brook trout creek. So it's exciting. We are seeing brown trout nearby, another good indicator that eventually we might see the brook trout move back in.
Okay, I guess that would be someone's asking, how do you know when it's been truly restored? And I suppose that is the best indicator of it, and it sounds like you're moving towards that goal. So that's all the time we have, unfortunately. There's still some other questions in here. Again, I encourage you to reach out to Kent and the other presenters. Thank you very much, Kent. Keep doing this great work in Hamilton. It's really impressive. And don't be afraid to call on some of your local landscape architects. So thank you. Just real quick, I know there's another session starting in 1 minute. I just wanted to let you know, delegates, that the gamification code for this session is going to be added into the chat, I believe, by Ina, if it hasn't already. I don't see it in there, Ryan, but we'll find a way to get it to the attendees if it is not, in fact, in the chat. So thank you very much, delegates. Please be sure to tune in for the rest of the sessions, the virtual field sessions, as well as the rest of the conference. We're hoping that this is the next best thing to actually being here, and we look forward to next year's session when we are hopefully able to be all together on a site. Thank you.